Gwen, come here, kitty. What are you doing? Don't rock the tripod. What's up, everybody? We're back at an undisclosed location, making another video in which you want to go catch some rats. She's so cute. In which we're going to talk about this argument. I'm sure you've heard it before. Oftentimes proposed by vegans. This idea that a spud is a steak, right? And I've heard this argument quite a few times, but most recently I heard it on the shit show of a debate between Primal Edge Health, Tristan, and Footsoldier. Now, like Tristan was saying, it is a basic bitch argument, and it's quite frankly appalling that people are still proposing this nonsense, acting like there's actually some credibility to it. Now, the argument, to expound on it a little bit, goes something along the lines of we can produce so many more calories per acre, let's say, growing spuds rather than raising cattle, meaning that potato monoculture specifically is a lot more efficient, environmentally friendly, blah, 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 all those things than cattle farming. And from that follows veganism, obviously, in case you weren't able to make the logical leap there. But anyway, whatever these stats were that Footsoldier was presenting that I didn't care to remember, I'm sure this study was conducted by impartial people, not some animal rights activist group. I'm sure Vegan Footsoldier could provide this study at a moment's notice with all the methods included. I'm sure it's not something he pulled out of his butthole or Dr. Greger's Twitter, right? I'm sure this is all legit and, on the up and up. Yeah, right. But anyway, this whole argument is really easy to debunk. Now, why is that? Well, that's because I don't want to eat spuds, and you can't make me. There's no ethical grounds, in other words, for any vegan to stand on and pretend like they could actually tell you what you should or shouldn't eat, right? There is no ethical argument for veganism, and try as they might bring these pseudo-ethical arguments to Carnival, all of that shit gets debunked, right? You've seen it. You heard it. If you got any new, bright ideas, let's go. Let's have a chat. Which reminds me, by the way, Vegan Footsoldier, I asked you to debate this other idea you had about suffering on Tristan's video. I messaged you on Twitter. You're ignoring me because you know how it's going to go down, right? You saw and you reviewed, not that I saw the video because I don't really care, but you reviewed my debate with Vegan Gains, so you know how painful it would be for you to talk to me. So keep on hiding, little boy. Coward. Look, yeah, I'm calling you out. You said you're interested in the truth, right? Well, let's see if you're right. I mean, I don't know exactly what your argument is. I have a pretty good idea, but I haven't heard the whole thing. So maybe I'm wrong. Let's hash it out. Let's see if truth is on your side. Doubt it. But anyway, potatoes have a lot of toxins in them, like solanine, I think that's how you say it, and oxalates, and they don't agree with a lot of people. They make, if we try to eat a lot of them, they'll eventually make us sick, quite possibly infertile, and, we don't want to play around like that, right? And this is another reason how this is another way how veganism is a self-refuting ideology, right? Because they talk about wanting to minimize animal suffering, but apparently this doesn't apply to the human animal that's suffering, some of us anyway, lots of us, eating these foods we're not really supposed to be eating, that just don't agree with us, like potatoes, right? Being a nightshade and highly, highly toxic at that. So, yeah, bottom line, I don't want to eat spuds, and you can't make me. And there is no ethical argument for veganism. So the whole argument just falls apart. But let's indulge the vegan for a second and consider this idea, even though it's not an argument for veganism, obviously. But this idea, this comparison of steak and potato agriculture, if you will, and this, what really is a false equivalence on many levels. Maybe we'll try to talk about three. First and foremost, and this should be obvious, and I kind of give it away with the title and one of the opening lines, I guess. A spud is not a steak. A steak is not a spud, right? Obviously. And I'm not going to get into the details because if you really want a detailed explanation, Frank Tufano is your guy. But obviously, meat is by far much more nutritionally dense. It is nutritionally complete, unlike the potato. And it's more bioavailable, easier to digest for the carnivorous human. Omnivore, carnivore. In this case, same thing. They're not mutually exclusive. But anyway, be that as it may, you can't compare. You could live off steak for a very, very long time. Potatoes, you could do okay for a while, but you're going to run into some serious problems, right? Bottom line. So what are we comparing here? You're not even comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing spuds to steak. You're not all there, buddy. So that's that false equivalency. Let's move that off to the side and talk about another false equivalency here. Because this whole argument assumes that the quality of pasture where animals graze is the same quality of land where spuds are grown, and that couldn't be further from the truth because the vast majority of pasture globally is useless for any sort of agriculture, plant agriculture, monoculture, right? And this is because a potato being a short cycle tuber, it grows from seed to a significant, it grows very fast. It requires rich soil, or at the very least, fairly level land where you could get combines in and out of very efficiently, right? Where you could get trucks to load up these potatoes, whatever you may need to do. And, if it's very even but not very fertile, the land, you're going to have to use a lot of chemical fertilizers, and the soil still has to be relatively soft, not rocky, right? It has to be much, much higher quality, however you slice it. French fries or potato chips. Pasture, the average hectare of pasture is not interchangeable with the average hectare of potato monoculture, right? The potato requires far more expensive land that there is less of in the world, and cattle can graze, these mountains that are only really accessible by beasts, be they donkeys, mules, or horses. You can't even get a motorcycle up there to some of these pastures, right? The land is like that, so it's impossible to do anything with it, especially since it's compacted soil, clay laden, rocky, right, uneven. It's just not fertile enough to begin with, and it's dry 6 months out of the year, right? And cattle do just fine on land like that. Potatoes, impossible, right? So here's another false equivalency. You're acting as if where potatoes are grown is exactly where cattle is being raised, or they're like right next to each other in the same sort of environment, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So you have no idea what you're talking about. This whole argument is just silly, 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 silly shit. Another thing that's a false equivalency here is that this whole argument assumes that a cow is just beef, when a lot of the cattle that gets turned into hamburger has, up until that point, provided us with millions and millions of calories in milk. But that doesn't get figured into the analysis, right? Right. Very, very honest analysis there. There's also leather. There's bone char, bone meal. You could look up what these things are used for. They all come from cattle. There's glue made from hooves. You know what I mean? There's dog food made out of the stuff that humans aren't willing to eat. There's all kinds of stuff that cattle gets turned into that benefits us, that brings in profits, that creates an industry. That's a lot more than steak or hamburger, right? But that doesn't figure into the analysis because the potato just might lose. And that's not what we're after here, are we, Footsoldier? So on 3 different levels, you've presented a false equivalency, acting like what? Like this means something, actually? Debate me, bro. Let's talk ethics. Uh-oh, there goes the kitty again. But, once again, a spud is not a steak. And I don't want to eat spuds. And you can't make me. I win.